I did not know that morning I would see my son on his knees. There was a pair of shoes by my back door when I woke up that day. Brown leather, worn at the heel. My late husband Gerald had worn them every Sunday for as long as I could remember. And after he passed, I never had the heart to move them. They just sat there in the half-light. I walked past them the way you walk past things you have made a kind of peace with. I thought about those shoes as I drove toward Raleigh. I do not know why. I thought about them again a few hours later, when I was standing very still on a sidewalk I had never been on before, watching something through a plate glass window that did not immediately make sense to me. Whatever I expected to find when I arrived that Tuesday, it was not that. Marcus was 34 that autumn. He had married Deanna 2 years before. A small ceremony in Charlotte where her family and mine stood on opposite sides of the room, and nobody quite figured out how to close the distance between them. Deanna had a measured kind of politeness, the kind that keeps a conversation moving without ever letting it settle. Her father, Raymond Childs, was something else. He had built a logistics company over 40 years and carried that fact with him everywhere, the way some people carry grief, except in his case it made him larger rather than smaller. The first time he met me, he held my hand a second too long. Long enough for me to understand something was being decided. When Marcus lost his position that spring, Raymond was the one who offered him a place in the company. Supply chain work. Good pay, Marcus said. Room to grow. I told him that sounded fine. I should have listened more carefully to what I said next, which was nothing. We spoke every Sunday evening. Gerald had started that, back when Marcus went away to college, and the habit had never broken. But after Marcus began working for Raymond, those calls began to sound like a man choosing his words very carefully before each one. I noticed. I told myself it was adjustment. New jobs carry weight. He was a grown man. I kept telling myself that until the Tuesday I decided to drive up and surprise him with a sweet potato pie. The building was a square gray thing on the east side of downtown. I found parking without trouble. The lobby had a long glass wall facing the street. I could see the reception desk and a hallway going back, and I was almost at the door when something made me slow down. I do not know what made me slow down. Some part of me knew before I looked. Marcus was in a room just off the hall. The door was open. I could see him clearly through the glass. He was kneeling on the floor. I stood there and I did not move. My hand was still holding the pie in its dish towel. I remember thinking, for just a moment, that I had the wrong building. That this was someone else. That this was something with a reasonable explanation I was about to understand. But it was Marcus. I knew his back. I knew the way he holds his shoulders. Raymond Childs was seated in a leather chair near the window. One shoe was off. Marcus had a cloth in his hand and he was working it in slow circles. Not fast. Not reluctant. The way you do something when you have been doing it long enough that you have stopped thinking about it. Raymond said something. I could not hear through the glass. But I saw his face clearly, and what was on it had nothing to do with the shoe. There was a pleasure in it. A settled kind of pleasure. The kind that comes not from getting what you want but from knowing someone else cannot refuse you. He shifted in the chair and pressed the sole of his other foot against Marcus's knee. Slowly. Deliberately. Then he said something else. A man near the desk laughed. Short-clipped. The laugh of someone who has understood what is required of him. I stood there and I breathed. Marcus looked up then. Maybe instinct, maybe he felt something change in the air outside the glass. His eyes moved toward the hallway and found me on the sidewalk. I do not know what my face showed him. I hope very little. But I know what his face did. He looked exactly the way he had looked at age 4, when he fell on the playground and turned to find me watching. Not crying yet. That space before, where a child's expression asks something there are no words for. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. Then I turned around and walked back to my car. I sat in that car with the pie on the passenger seat, and the dish towel half undone. I fixed the towel. My hands did that while my mind went somewhere else. What I kept returning to was not Raymond. I had heard it, on those Sunday calls. Something underneath the ordinary words. A careful kind of stillness in Marcus's voice. The same stillness a person holds when they are trying not to disturb something that might shift. I had heard it and I had filed it under things I did not know how to address from 40 miles away. The truth is simpler than that. I had not wanted to look. Looking would have required me to do something. And I was tired in the way older women get tired, not from lack of sleep, but from having already spent so much of yourself over so many years that you begin to count what is left before you reach for it. That tiredness had made a decision I pretended I was not making. I sat in the car until my hands stopped feeling like they belonged to someone else. Then I got out my phone and made a call. Patricia Hurd had worked alongside Gerald for 22 years. She was the kind of woman who knows where things are buried not because she put them there, but because she has been around long enough to know the soil. I told her what I had seen. Just the facts, the way you describe a road. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Give me a few days." I drove home to Durham. I did not call Marcus that Sunday. I sent a text saying I had a cold, and would call when I felt better. He sent back a string of concern. I told him I was fine. I do not know if he believed me. I am not sure it mattered. The days after that were strange. I kept starting things I did not finish. I planted bulbs I forgot to water. I woke at 2 in the morning and lay there thinking about what Patricia might find, and then thinking about what she might not find, and whether I had set something in motion that I did not fully understand. I thought, maybe this is the kind of thing that cannot be touched. Maybe Raymond Childs has been doing this long enough that nothing leaves a mark on him anymore. That thought sat with me for longer than I would like to admit. Patricia called on a Thursday. She kept it simple. She had spoken to some people who had been in that building before Marcus. 2 of them had left under circumstances that nobody was talking about directly, but the way they were not talking told her enough. She had also found a woman who had been collecting those silences for a long time, quietly, carefully, the way you collect evidence when you cannot afford to be wrong. That woman needed one thing. Not accusations. Not drama. Just someone willing to say plainly what they saw. I told Patricia I could do that. I was not sure if it would matter. I still did not know. 10 days after I stood on that sidewalk, I drove back to Raleigh. This time I told Marcus I was coming. He met me at a diner 2 blocks from his apartment. He was thinner than he had been at Easter. Not in a way that would alarm a stranger, but in the way that alarms a mother. He ordered coffee and set the mug down without drinking from it. He kept his hands around it the whole time we sat there, like he was warming something that was not getting warm. I did not ask him about the shoe. I had decided not to. Instead I talked about his father. About how Gerald had once taken a position that paid well and asked too much of him. And how it had taken almost a year before Gerald could name what was wrong. Not in a way that allowed him to fix it, just to name it. And what Gerald had done when he finally could. Marcus was still while I talked. Very still. The kind of still that means you are not just listening but sorting. He looked out the window for a while. The parking lot across the street. A hardware store. The sky doing that low October thing it does in North Carolina, gray and close and not quite decided. Then he said, "What did he do? Dad. What did he do about the job?" "He left it," I said. "Found something smaller. Something that did not ask him to disappear in pieces." Marcus turned his coffee mug a quarter turn. Just a small movement. He did not look at me when he asked his next question. He said, "What if I cannot afford to leave?" I waited before I answered. I let the question sit between us the way it deserved to sit. Then I said, "I am not talking about money." He nodded once. Very slowly. His jaw tightened the way Gerald's used to tighten when a thing landed that he had to hold somewhere for a while before he could speak it. We sat like that for a long time. Neither of us said anything else about it. We talked about other things. We ate. He drove me to my car and hugged me in the parking lot longer than he usually would. I did not make anything of it. I just held on. What I learned later, months after everything had settled, was that Marcus had gone home that night and sat at his kitchen table for a very long time. He told me this himself, on one of our Sunday calls, in the halting way he has when something still costs him something to say. He said he had sat there trying to figure out which he was more afraid of, leaving or staying, and that at a certain point the two fears had become so equal that neither one could make the decision for him. He had to make it without them. He told me he thought about his father's shoes. I did not ask him what he meant. I think I already knew. It was not quick and it was not clean. That is the thing about these situations. They resolve in the way rivers reroute, slowly, around something immovable, and by the time the water is running clear again, the landscape looks different than you expected. Marcus gave a statement to the woman Patricia had connected me with. He did not have to sit in a room with Raymond. He did not have to be argued with or confronted. He just told the truth to people who had been waiting for enough of it to matter. There were others. It turned out Marcus was not the first person who had polished that man's shoes. Raymond stepped back from the board sometime in January. The details of that I never fully learned. People had started talking, and when people start talking the right way to the right people, things shift even when you cannot see exactly where the weight moved. I do not know what Raymond Childs does now. I have not needed to know. Deanna was harder. She called me one evening in February, unexpected, and her voice had that careful quality it always had, but underneath it something else. She said, "I want to understand what happened. Not what people are saying. What actually happened." I told her what I saw through the glass. She did not speak for a moment. I could hear her breathing. Then she said, "He never told me it was like that." I said, "I know." She said, "I am trying to figure out how to be angry at the right person." I said, "That is a reasonable thing to be trying to figure out." We did not resolve anything that night. She hung up and I sat with the phone in my hand for a while, looking at nothing in particular. She and Marcus went through a long, difficult stretch after that. Some things that come apart do not go back to the exact same shape, and I am not sure that is always a loss. Marcus found a position with a freight company out of Greensboro. Smaller, quieter work. He called me the first Sunday after he started and I noticed something about his voice before I could name it. I noticed it the way you notice when a house settles back on its foundation after something has shaken it. He sounded like himself. Not adjusted. Not careful. Just himself. I did not say anything about it. Some things you hold privately. Last spring I moved Gerald's shoes from by the back door. I had kept them there for 30 years in the particular way you keep things when you are not ready to decide what they mean. I put them on the small shelf in the hallway near the front door, where I walk past them every morning when the light is still low and the house is quiet, and nothing has asked anything of me yet. They are the same shoes, but something about where they stand now is different. I think Marcus would understand that, if I tried to explain it. I think he already does. Every morning when I pass them, I stop for just a second. I do not know exactly why. Maybe it is enough just to see them clearly.